Hello and welcome to episode 94 of the Inventive Marketing Club. We're here every week to help you build a better marketing strategy. On this week, we're going to have a Google Analytics 4 recap. So basically, at the end of this month, Universal Analytics, so the original Google Analytics, will stop working. It'll stop collecting data. It'll still, I shouldn't say it stopped working, it'll stop collecting data. So your Universal Analytics will still be available to see for a period of time. Google haven't specified how long, but it will still be available, but it will stop collecting new data. So it's important to transition your website data collection over to Google Analytics 4 and make sure that all new data is going into that, and all of your conversion and tracking is set up too. So in this walkthrough, I'm going to take you through how to set up that account and how to do it. I'll see you on the other side. So what is Google Analytics 4, or GA4 as it's referred to? And that's very useful to know. Call it GA4 because if you want to find out anything about the new version online, don't just put in Google Analytics. That will tend to refer to the old one. Type in GA4 and then what it is you're looking for. So this is an update to Universal Analytics, which is what they call their previous one or previous version. And the benefit, if you will, is that this can work across different platforms. So you can bring all your data together from your website or web app, as well as apps on phones, tablets, or other devices, because it's all JavaScript events. So you can bring all this data into one place. That doesn't really affect me or most of my clients because they're not tracking across multiple devices. But for some people, that's really useful. So it's a free tool where you can track people who visit your website and really getting a lot of interesting data. Something I do need to investigate, and I haven't. It's difficult to get this information out of Google. Really, is how invasive they are with their data collection. I know the previous version really tried to slurp up as much data as possible, but that was pre-GDPR, and they've been trying to lock it down. With Google Analytics 4, it is meant to be better, but I've yet to get to the bottom of exactly what data it collects and how we can make sure that that is GDPR compliant. So for the time being, if you're using Google Analytics 4 to collect data, you'll still need to put up a cookie banner and request permission. One of the benefits with Google or GA4 as well is it uses what they call machine learning to help surface interesting data. Now, I will just touch on that a little bit in this presentation. It might be something that we can dive into a bit more next time, or certainly if you want to dive in and see how that works. But essentially, these are called insights, and they're presented throughout the interface. So it's sort of drawing forth data it thinks you might be interested in, which is a nice idea. Sometimes I find it a bit cluttered, really. It's sort of giving me too much data. I like the data where I know where it is in my own dashboard. I find it very difficult with lots of information thrown at me. However, sometimes it's quite useful to have other bits surfaced. Okay, just a few terms you should know. First of all, users. These are unique visitors to your website. People use different terms, and I think Google has moved to this term over time, but certainly in GA4, they are called users. And a user is where you have, depending over your time range, it's looking at one unique person that has visited that website. So if you've got 10 users for a month, then you have 10 unique individual visitors who have come through to your website. A session is a block of time spent on your site. So this could be where you might have one person who's visited several times. So in which case that's called a session. So you might have one person who's visited 3 times, that's 3 sessions. Bounce rate, that's where you have a single page visit. So the bounce rate is the percentage of people who actually visited and then bounced away again. The higher the bounce rate, the more people are actually having only a single page visit. Now, a lot of people get worried about bounce rate. They think, oh, I've got a high bounce rate. It's not necessarily a problem. A high bounce rate means people are just visiting one page on your website. That could be a good thing. It might be that you're getting people to bounce in from a social media post, for example. They see the article that they want to read, and then they go back to social media again and continue reading the feed. That's fine. If that's the job of your website, is to draw people in to read articles and then bounce them back out to wherever they are again, that's great. However, it's always nice if you can bring that bounce rate down a little bit. So we can just keep them on the website a little bit longer. Maybe you take them to another interesting article, or we get them to fill out a subscription form, which takes them through to a thank you page. It's always good to think about how you can reduce the bounce rate, but don't get worried about what that bounce rate number is. It's just good to know what it is and try and reduce it over time if you can. And then pages per session. So that's the amount of pages viewed in one session, and conversions. This is a desired outcome. Conversions work slightly differently in GA4. They used to be called goals in Universal Analytics. Now it's called conversions, and they're all based on events, JavaScript events. So you can have a page visit, that's an event. You can also have a custom bit of JavaScript that's fired on the website, maybe because a button's been clicked or a form's been filled out. They're all events. And I'll show you how to add those in so we can track those conversions. But essentially, a conversion could be someone subscribing to a form, someone buying something online, clicking a button. Depends what you want what you're tracking, really. And that's a good question. What are we trying to measure? I think a lot of people like having lots of data thrown at them. Maybe I don't, because I have lots of clients that I'm looking at, so I'm seeing lots of data all the time. So I'm always trying to find a way of presenting that data in a clear way where I can ignore what I don't need to know and I can just look at the important bits of data. So it's always good to come back and think, what am I trying to measure? What do I want to know? What questions do I want answered? Is it, I need to know how many people are buying from me online? Or even better, how many people are coming through on which channel and buying from me online and effectively converting? What social engagement am I getting? You know, it's great that people might be commenting on social media, but are they coming through to our website? What are the best marketing channels? And that for me is really important. I need to know what work we're doing on the website is working, what work we're doing off the website is working and bringing people to the website so that they convert. So that's what I'm trying to measure. But it's really good to take a moment to think about, well, what do I actually need to know that's going to help me run my business? I do find that if you are working with in a larger company or with an agency, you might be getting bombarded by a lot of data. And that's because it's often some people's jobs is to provide you with lots of information. Their job is to show that they're doing lots of work. And you need to resist the allure of all of this data and try and get through to the nub of what it is that you want to know. So if you're working with an agency or you're working with someone who manages your social media for you, you want to know what meaningful conversions and activity they're doing for you, not just about how many likes or how many reshares or how much engagement online. But you want to think about how many people are actually coming through from those Instagram posts, those TikTok videos that we're putting out, actually coming back to the website or wherever we're converting and actually converting, actually making a sale, because that's what's important. All the rest of it is useful to that person. But as a business owner, what's important to you is I'm paying a certain amount of money for someone to manage our ads or our social media or PR, whatever it might be. And then ultimately, this is the result. These are the conversions I'm getting. Anyway, so migrating to Google Analytics 4, it's reasonably straightforward. I'm going to give you a little bit of an example. It's difficult to show exactly how it works because it's kind of, once I've migrated a website, then it's migrated through to Google Analytics 4. So I'm going to half migrate a website so you can see it working. But the important thing to know is that Universal Analytics will stop data collection next year, July 2023. What that means is, while data collection will stop, they will continue to allow you to use the service to view the data that's already present in there and download it to some degree. The problem I've got with this with Google Analytics 4 at the moment. Google are heavily pushing us towards using it. And we know that because they're going to stop Universal Analytics collecting data next year. The problem is Google Analytics 4, in my opinion, doesn't feel quite finished yet. It doesn't have all of the features that Universal Analytics has. It's better in many ways, simpler in many ways, but also harder. And I think what will happen is actually we'll get to July 2023, and that is a soft deadline they've set to start moving the majority of people over. I think once we get to that deadline, they'll push it out further because people will start complaining because they haven't realized that they need to move forward. What we're trying to do is up until the end of the year, I'm going to make sure all of the websites that we managed are migrated over so that, and what that means is you'll have both Google Analytics 4 and Universal Analytics running in parallel. So you'll still be able to use the dashboards that you've used for, forever and a day, but GA4 will also be collecting data at the same time. So when we come to switch over, you should ultimately have a full year's worth of data. That's the hope anyway. Okay, so let's have a walkthrough. So if I switch shares here. Hopefully you can see that. What I'll do is we'll do this in sections. First, I'll give you a quick walkthrough of the first screen you're going to see once you've logged in. Just a quick summary, really. So on here, we've got a quick view of the dashboard. It gives you the last 7 days of data. So, I should mention that Selmac have kindly let us use their data for this walkthrough, because actually we haven't converted ours until recently. So there's not enough data in there for you to see, but Selmac has a month or so's of data in there. So it's actually quite useful to see what's going on. So thank you very much, Dave at Selmac. So what this homepage shows us is a quick overview, the last 7 days of data. Also, people who are currently active. So we can see on the right-hand side, there's a little panel, users in the last 30 minutes, and this shows how many people have been online. So we can see that 8 people have been using the Selmac site recently and where they come from. On the left-hand side, we've got the last 7 days, and we can actually click through these different sections at the top. Currently, the graph is showing users. So we've had, over the last 30 days, 3.3 thousand users, and that's great. That's actually up from the last month. Well done them. You can look at just new users. So these are people in the last report. Sorry, I said last 30 days. It's last 7 days. If we click on the new users tab, we can see how many people have looked at the Selmac site for the very first time within the last 7 days. Also, we haven't hooked it up like this. It's not really relevant for this site, but if you did, if you had an e-commerce site, for example, then you could start tracking total revenue generated throughout that period of time, and also engagement, how long people have spent on the site. There are some other things here. You've got recently viewed reports. So you can see they're all today because I was just quickly finishing off preparing for this presentation. But might be quite handy if you want to dive into a report that you use frequently. And then you've got insights. So this is down the bottom. So this is where Google is going to surface data that it thinks might be interesting. So I'll just pull out a couple here. The first one, it says Google / organic. So they're natural listings that you're not paying for on Google, drove the most conversions. So it drove 35% of conversions. And that's good to know. So from our perspective, we might say, actually, the work we're doing on Google is doing well. It's actually driving a lot of conversions, which tends to be RFQs, requests for quotes for Selmac. So that actually means we might go, well, Google's doing well. We might put more effort into doing that. If you want to see more of the insights, you can just click on View All Insights on the right-hand side. And if there are any more, it's going to show you them. But let's have a look at the next section, which is reports. Now, when you click on reports, you're going to get something similar to the homepage, but slightly different and actually customizable, which I'm going to show you at the end. So in the reports section, you've got a snapshot, which gives you lots of interesting data, which I'll go through later, and we'll pick out some that might be interesting. You've also got other things you can look at, like real time. This is really useful for testing. It's actually quite fun if you send out an email newsletter. you can start seeing the world light up with people as they read your newsletter and click through to it. So that's quite fun. It doesn't really achieve anything, but it's quite fun. I find real-time really useful for when you are testing to make sure that you've got active data coming through. I don't think it's a particularly useful report, but it's quite fun. Others we've got are acquisition, engagement, monetization, demographics, and technology. So what browser size and so on. I'm going to dig into some of those as we go. But before I do that, I want to go through the process of installing Google Analytics. So I'll go to my next tab for that. So if you don't have a Google Analytics account, it's going to naturally want to give you, it's a fairly straightforward process. You just need to go to Google, search for Google Analytics, sign up for an account, and then you'll start creating a Google Analytics property. Now, by default, it's going to give you a GA4 property. It's not going to recommend the old one. However, you can set up an old Universal Analytics property if you want to. I would recommend at this stage not bothering doing that unless there's a particular reason why you want to. I would just stick with the default and set up a new GA4 property. It's difficult for me to show you that without flicking around a lot and logging in and out. So I'm not going to show you setting up a new account, but it's reasonably straightforward. What I'll do is show you the process which most people are going to be going through, which is where you have an existing universal analytics property and you're converting it. So I'm going to use our Inventive People website, which is actually redundant now. So we're not collecting any data from it. We've merged inventivepeople.co.uk into our main rather inventive site. So it's one I can discard. It doesn't, I don't need to worry about it. So what you do is I'm in Universal Analytics for Inventive People. I go to the property section here and I can see a new option that would have been added months back actually now called GA4 Setup Assistant. So I click on that. And I want to use this option. I want to create a new Google Analytics 4 property. I wouldn't worry about this unless you've already set up another Google Analytics 4 property. I think for most people, you won't have done anything on this and you'll be coming through from as a newbie really to Google Analytics 4. So click on the Get Started button. And it's just telling you about what it can do. You don't need to tick anything here. Oh, that's interesting. What's come up here? I'll talk through that in a minute. If your site has been made by us recently, I'm trying to think how recently we do this. I'd say in the last couple of years, then this step should have a little tick box here saying enable data collection using your existing global site tags. So you'd be able to tick that box and then just create the property. Now, because this website hasn't been active, or it's using an old format of Google Analytics, I can't remember what it's called, but it's one of their original data collection tags. If your website still has one of those, you're going to need to update the tag to use the new code. And I think because this website hasn't been running, I can't do that. So let me just quickly show you. If I go back to tracking info here. So what I want to do is if I've got the old code, I can go into my tracking info, tracking code, and then just copy and paste this little bit of information and put it onto my website. And then I'm going to be using the new tracking code going forward. But that's all I need to do. If I connect a property, then basically that will set everything up. It will create a new account for me and it will connect the two together. So it means that my new GA4 will start collecting data in parallel with my existing Universal Analytics. I think that's all we've got there. Oh yeah, let me move over. So what it will look like once you have signed up is you will be in your new Google Analytics 4 property. And you want to go to data stream. It should automatically take you to this page, to be fair. So you go to data stream, select the data stream here, which is for your website. And if you want to add the tag to your website, there's a number of different ways you can do it. I will show you one here. If I click on this, where it says view tag instructions down the bottom. It's going to give you some examples of how to incorporate it into your website builder. Interestingly, WordPress isn't there, which is quite strange. They do have Monster Insights, though. And Monster Insights is a plugin that we often use for allowing you to connect Google Analytics with WordPress. So if you were to click on that, it will give you instructions. Otherwise, I'm going to show you how to do it manually. So if we click on install manually, it's going to give us the G tag code. Now we can copy and paste and put that onto our website. Depending on your website, you're going to have different places where you need to put this. On a WordPress site, you can use something like Monster Analytics, or they may have an area where you can add code to the header or the footer. My preference would be to put that in the footer, but sometimes they like it in the head tag. So it does specify it wants it in the head element. But that's it. You copy and paste that in. If that's something you can't do, I'm sure your web developer can help. It's probably the most tricky part of what we're going to do in this particular session. And then that's it. That will take you through everything. So let's dive in and have a look at the actual reports. Now, as I mentioned, the best way to understand what data you want from this is to think about what questions you want answered. Otherwise, you're going to be drowning in data. So I've got a few questions that we're going to start with. The first is, where do my new users come from? You've got a website, you're doing marketing, and you want to know which of your marketing efforts work. So you want to know, are they coming from Google because I'm doing lots of search engine optimization? Are they coming through from Instagram because actually I've hired someone to do that for me, or I'm doing a lot of posts on there? I think it's the first thing people want to know. So if I scroll down, I can see there's a little section here that basically asks that question. Where do your new users come from? And you've got a little quick at-a-glance graph. So we can see that actually for Selmac, most of them come from organic search. Some from direct, and what direct means is that Google cannot determine where they came from, or they enter the site directly. So they could have clicked on a link in your email footer. It could be staff within your company who are using the site and just going to selmac.com. I would say more often than not, direct traffic is going to be a result of privacy from various the privacy that's being really sort of layered onto the internet, where various browsers or search engines are sort of stripping off the referral information so that websites aren't able to glean all of that. It might be actually something that we see increase over time. I certainly have seen direct increase over time. So it's something that I would just generally ignore, that direct. You know, we can't really fully understand exactly where those people are coming from. However, if you are worried, you might want to try and look into that and say, well, maybe some of my data isn't being tagged correctly, so it's actually coming through as direct. It could be that there's an old link on the website where it's going to a non-HTTPS link and then bouncing over to your secure link. In doing that, it'll actually wipe out the referrer. Sometimes bouncing between different websites can wipe out the referrer. So it's if it's high and you're worried about it, it might be worth looking into. Still warm. So moving on down the list here, we've got paid search. So if you're running any ads on Google or otherwise, they're going to appear in that section. If you're sending out email campaigns, that's the next one down that says email. Referral, that's from other websites. And then we've got these new ones, which you wouldn't necessarily have seen before in Universal Analytics, which is organic video. So that's usually going to be coming from YouTube, and organic social from any other social account. They've actually split out YouTube a bit more from socials. It was that YouTube was lumped in with social, but now they've split it out a little bit more. We haven't got it on here, but if they're doing paid ads on social or YouTube, you're going to start seeing those show up as well. But what we want to do is actually have a deep dive into this. So I'm going to click through onto View User Acquisition, which is a link at the bottom. That takes us through to the report with a bit more detail. So what I want to do here is currently the date range is the last 28 days. Now, I know we haven't got a huge amount of data in here for Selmac because they've only been running this for the last 3 months or so. But I'm just going to show you how you can expand this range out if you want to look at the last 30 days, 90 days or more. So all you need to do is just find the date range on the top right of the report, click on that, and then you've got various options. You can look at the last 7 days if that works for you, or 30 days, 90 days, 12 months, or full years, or you can even custom select a date range. 90 days generally is good for me. I know it won't show all that data, but I'll show you what it looks like. So we can, if I've selected 90 days, we can see that actually there's no data up until the 13th of August or so, 15th of August, where it started collecting the data from that point onwards. But you get how this is going to work. So let's scroll down a little bit. Now we've got a full, underneath the graph, we've got a full amount of data, so a full table showing all the data really. We've got more detailed version of showing all the different channel groupings from organic through to email, referral, and so on. But we've got a lot of the data that, that makes all of that up. So we can see the amount of new users that come through on search. There's a new users column. So these are people that haven't been seen in this date period before. We've got a new column called engaged sessions. Now, what this means, it's kind of a little bit of a calculation based on the number of sessions, so multiple times people use it, that have lasted longer than 10 seconds or had some kind of conversion event or various other factors. So that could be quite interesting because actually, when you look at it, you might say, well, I've had lots of users or lots of new users to the website, but actually all I care about is that people who are engaged, who spent a bit of time on there and didn't just bounce away. You've got engagement rate, which is just the percentage of people who are engaged as opposed to the total amount of sessions that came in. And then you've got what I like at the end. I've just changed the ordering. What I like at the end is conversions. So I will come to conversion a little bit later. But let's say you had an e-commerce website and you were selling something. You would want to know which channels brought in the best conversions or the most conversions, because then you want to focus your time and efforts on those conversions. I think that's it there. I think that's everything that on this particular one that would be very useful. So let's think about the next question. Which pages get the most views? So I'm going to go back to reports. Report snapshot. And then if I have a look on here, there's another question. Which pages and screens get the most views? Now it calls it screens because obviously we're looking across both websites and apps. So some of the terminology is slightly different, but for our purposes, which pages get the most views? This answers the question. So we can see here a quick rundown of all the page titles and the number of views that are coming through. The problem with this little view is it's trying to show the full page title. Now, because of the work we do with search engine optimization, we maximize the size of that page title. Now it's around 50 to 60 characters normally that Google will show. So what it's doing is actually truncating the middle of the title. So it becomes a little bit difficult to read exactly what the title is, which is a bit of a shame because Universal Analytics used to default to the page path, which we used to keep quite short, and it would be nice and sharp in here quite nicely. So it's a bit of a shame on this particular view, it defaults to the page title, but that's fine. It gives us a rough idea. But if we want to dive into the detail, just like we did with the previous one, we can click on the little link in the bottom, which is View Pages and Screens. I'm going to change the date range to 30 days, just so the graph reflects that. That's better. So again, we've got a graph showing a couple of different, basically it's different lines for different pages here. I don't know, I don't think that's particularly useful for me. It might be if you've got a couple of the top pages, you might be able to say, oh, hey, why do we get loads of traffic coming through on the Mayer geared head drilling machine? Why do we get so many people searching for it at that point? Maybe you're running a campaign or something like that. It's going to make sense. But scrolling down, what I want to do in the table, as you know, it looks very similar to the previous acquisition screen that we're looking at, is we've got a table here, but I want to change it so it shows us page path, because that's the bit I recognize. So if I click on page title and screen class at the top, I can change it through to page, path, and screen class. Now we're going to have something I recognize a bit more. So we've got root, which is a slash. We've got products, we've got news pages, and so on. So this is quite nice now. Now I can see which are the top pages that people are looking at. So obviously the home page, that's getting the majority of visits. But next one down is the bandsaws soaring product category. So that's actually pretty popular, certainly in the last 30 days. A news page, 10 things I never realized. Didn't know metal. I don't know. That sounds quite confusing because actually Google, I think WordPress has shortened that and removed some of the joining words that we need to work out what that says. But that would be if you had written that article recently and you're starting to see that gain some traction, that's quite useful to know. So this gives us the top 10. If we want to see more than that, we can actually go up to the rows per page and increase it to 25, 50, up to 250. I'm just going to do it to 50. And this report is quite useful if you are working with a blog writer who's looking at your articles for you, or someone helping with SEO. It's quite useful to see if the time and effort you spent on these articles is actually driving traffic into the site. And most importantly, whether it's driving conversions. Now we can see here that actually the contact us page is going to drive conversions. Yes, because actually at the moment, the only conversion that is active is the contact page visit. So that's the only one that's going to drive it. But that's really useful. I find this incredibly useful if you're working to optimize your content and actually get more visits to that particular page. Or if you've got a particularly popular blog article, a lot of people coming in from search, and you're thinking, well, how can we capitalize on that? How can we get people who are reading that page to then move on to the next step? So next thing we're going to look at is conversions. So if we go back to the report snapshot, the question I might ask, and there's two here, is what are my top conversions? And also which sources generated those sales as well? That's really important because so far we've just looked at how much traffic we're getting from the different sources, the different channel groupings. What I want to know is how many actual conversions are coming through from them. So if I scroll down and find the question, which is, if I can find it, what are your top conversions? So we can just see there's one in here, which is a contact page view. If I click on view conversions, we're going to go through to it. There we are. Now, the more conversions you set up on here, if they've got data, you'll start to see them appear on here. So we've only got one that's got data at the moment. What I'm going to add to this to make a bit more sense is another column. And I can do that by clicking the plus icon just to the right of the first column, which says event name. If I click on that and I search for channel grouping. Now, I've come up with two things here. In the original Universal Analytics, I'll just have default channel grouping, which means it's going to show me those conversions and which channel grouping they came through from. So I can start splitting out and say, oh, actually, I got a lot of contact page visits through from organic, or I got a lot through from social. But what we can do now is something even better. We can look at the first user channel grouping. So we can look at the channel that person came through first. And that's the one I'm more interested in. So I'm going to select that first user channel grouping. So now it adds another column on. So we've got 6 different rows here, all for contact page view, and they are now split out between the first user default channel grouping. Now, if we ignore direct, we come to organic search. So that has the most amount of conversions where it is the very first time that person appeared. Paid search, we've got 8 conversions there. So that's the very first time they saw it. Referral, email, and so on. So this shows to me that actually our organic search is doing well. We want to invest more in PPC, sorry, not PPC, in SEO. Maybe our paid search is, it's bringing in traffic, but maybe we want to see if we can refine that a little bit. And we can also maybe see, oh, we've run an email campaign and we have brought through a conversion on there. That's only one conversion, but it might have actually generated a sale. Now, I will say with SaleMac, most of the sales they're going to get are through some kind of call into their sales team or an email that's sent. So really, we're not able to track the revenue generated through this. But if you're an e-commerce site, what you could see on the right-hand side is the revenue that was generated alongside that. So you can see that maybe the email, you only got one conversion from it. So one person came in and bought something, but what they bought was high value, more than organic might have a event revenue that was slightly lower. It's difficult to show, unfortunately, because I haven't got an e-commerce site set up for you. But that's quite useful. I think that's a really good way of understanding all the different conversions and, most importantly, where people are coming from. But let's add a new conversion. Let's pretend this was an e-commerce site. So we're going to add a new conversion in here. What I need to do is go through to configure. And that's on the left-hand side. Click on configure. Now we can see all the events that are being tracked at the moment. There's a lot of default events. There's a lot of events that Monster Insights will add as well, like file downloads and clicks and scroll positions. There's also a page view. Now that's the default event that the Google tag adds. But what we're going to do is add a new event. Now it's a little bit more tricky, I think, than the Universal Analytics, but bear with me, it does make sense. So these are some of the events that have already been added. We're going to add a new one, and we're going to call it purchase. Now, the first thing we need to do is we want to track the event name that equals, I think it's page view. Just check, yeah, it's page view. So first of all, we want to make sure the condition is only when it's a page view. So we're looking for the event name page view. And we want to add another condition, and that is where page location contains, because this is a WooCommerce site, we're going to use the default final thank you page if you've fully completed a WooCommerce transaction, which is /checkout /order received. I want to leave this copy parameters from source event, which basically means any additional data it's sending, we want to take that as well, but just leave that and then you can click create. And our event has been added. So it's reasonably straightforward. It's about, if you think that the little tracker on your website is just sending lots of JavaScript events about what people are doing, these, if we want to use them as conversions, we just need to filter those events that are all being tracked and stored. So we've added one event called purchase. If I close this now and go through to conversions, I can add that purchase event. Ignore this one. I think that was pulled in when they did the migration. So we want to add a conversion event called purchase. So that is the event name we've just created, and then click save. It adds it to the top and marks it as a conversion. So it's ready to go. So that means if we had this as an e-commerce site, when someone buys, so they go through the entire checkout process, they pay, they'll land on that thank you page, that checkout order received page. That will trigger a page event, which now we've set up as a conversion. So going forward, when we're looking at reports like the previous one, what are top conversions, we will be able to see our purchase as one of the conversions in there. So that's really super handy, because if you're an e-commerce site, you live and die based on the amount of people buying and where they come from. So you need to really know where to focus your marketing efforts. I'm going to turn that off for now because they don't need that one. So what's another question that would be really useful? What are the top landing pages? You need to know where people come from. Now, the original Universal Analytics had this as a default page already set up. For us, what we can use is the new explore function, where we can actually start diving in and splitting up the data however we want. This is the point where I feel that GA4 gets more complicated than the original one, but it also pairs back the data and is a bit more useful at the same time. Like, I like the dashboards. The dashboards do give you this very useful heads up data, but for some of the data, you need to work a little bit harder. So I don't know, it's going to some people are going to love it. I think data heads are going to absolutely love this, but people who are just want to run a business, they're going to find it a bit overwhelming. But hopefully over time, with watching through this video, you're going to find it a little bit easier. So if I want to know what the top landing pages are, I need to sort of explore through and create a custom report. So I click on explore on the left. You can use these templates to start you off, but I'm going to use the blank one. Now, if you've used Data Studio, and I talked about Data Studio in a IMC94 about how it sort of brings together lots of fields, you'll recognize some of how this works here. So what I want to do is I want to first give it a name and call this landing pages. Now, first I want to add a dimension. Now, the dimension I want to add is page. Let's see if I can find that. Page. I think I'll go with page location. That should be the right one. Import. And then the metrics, so the numbers that associate to that are exits. Oh, actually, let me get them the right way around. Entrances, so how many times people came in on that page, and exits. Why not add that as well? How many times people actually left on that page? That was the last page they saw. So now I added them in there. What I'm also going to do is change the date range to be the last 30 days. Apply. And then I'm going to drag the dimensions into the right places. So the first place I'm going to put them is into rows. And then I'm going to add entrances into values. And that will start generating the table. So now we can actually start seeing the data. So we can see that the home page had 1,079 entrances. If I drag in exits as well, I can see that actually it had 787 exits, which means a lot of people did come into the site, but also a lot of people left on that. And so what we can see here is which the top landing pages. So we can see that the news page was one of the top landing pages, had a lot of entrances there. Now, actually, if we want to just slim down the information shown in page location, we can change the dimension. So if I get rid of that one, I'm going to add in page path. So you can see I'm just using the search at the top to filter. So I'm going to have page path and screen class, import that, and then drag it into the right position. And then remove that one. So now we've got a very condensed view. And we can see that the home page, you know, all the data is very similar, but the home page, how many entrances it has. Our news page here, products, and we can just see, you know, actually a lot of people not only visit the band source page, but that is a page they enter on as well. So it's a very useful report in terms of digging down, looking at the data. If you wanted to, you can explore different visualization techniques here. I don't think they apply really. I think if I click on a donut chart, it's not really going to make much sense. But depending on the data you're trying to collect or visualize, that would be useful to you. Yeah, it's a really, I think it's like bringing, as I said, it's similar to Data Studio. So it's like bringing a mini Data Studio inside Google Analytics, which is quite useful. But it just means that they've taken some of the default reports away and you have to make them yourself. Now, if I go back to reports, or sorry, explore, you'll be able to see that that landing page report has popped up down here. So I can always go back to it. Or I can delete it. Okay, what other questions have we got that are useful? Which campaigns are working best? So by campaign, if you are running some kind of paid pay-per-click on Google, or you're running some adverts on Facebook, or you are using QR codes in your printed material, or you're sending out emails, each of those can generate additional data that when people come onto your website, it can tell you about, you can kind of align them all across the same campaign. So you can give it the same campaign code. you can determine what keywords were used if it's an ad campaign a pay-per-click campaign on Google Ads. There's lots of additional information that can be added using UTM codes. So first of all, I'm going to show you how you can look at your campaigns and then how to create a UTM, how to create this additional data. So the first place we go is back to reports. And then we go to acquisition and then traffic acquisition. This by default will show us the channel grouping, so just the broad areas where people come from. What I can do is click on the session default channel grouping dropdown, click on that and select session campaign. That now switches over to show you the campaign data that has sort of been received by GA4. Now, it used to in Universal Analytics, if it didn't have any campaign data, it would just show not set. What it does now, instead of showing not set, well, it does show not set for some of it, but for others, it does split it out. So it will show you it's not set, but we know it's organic. It's not set, but we know it's a referral. So it's actually bringing through some of that data. But if I scroll past those, I can actually start to see the campaigns. So we can see the campaigns names here. Save on these special offers, an email. Okay, it just says email. Find the needle, summer special offers. You know, these are names that Dave or you as a marketing manager are going to recognize what these names are because you've entered these into your ad campaign or your email. But what we can also do is add another column. If I click on the plus icon just next to session campaign, called source. And just like before, we can have first user source. So we can see from those campaigns where the first people came in on. Now it's starting to be a bit clearer. So I can start to see where these campaigns have come from. Now, this is particularly useful if you've got exactly the same campaign name that you're running across multiple channels. So if you're running a Google Ads campaign, you can use one campaign name there. You can also use that same campaign name in Facebook and on email if they're all sort of advertising the same thing. When you do that, what you'd see in here is the same name. It's like, wow, special offers. And you'd see that 3 times. And then you'd see from Facebook, from Google, or from email. And so you'd see all those different locations. So this can be really useful to see all of your campaigns and where was the first source people found that campaign. I won't go through all the data in the table on the right-hand side, but you've got all the very similar data that we've looked at before, including conversions. So this is where you can see how effective they were, and you can see whether an offer is working or not. Right, let's go and add some more in, or sorry, show you how you can actually make your own campaign codes. I use this little website here, which you can access on ga-dev-tools.web.app. It's not a particularly exciting URL. If you just type in campaign URL builder into Google, you should get this come up. So what this allows you to do is enter in the website you want people to land on, which could be the home page, or it could be a sub page. A campaign name, a campaign source as to where it came from, how it got there, what the medium is. Now, I'll give you an example for a QR code. Let's say you are printing a brochure and you've got lots of QR codes in there linking people through to a video that they can watch online, or linking people through to a product page. In fact, Selmac has done this in their brochure. So what you need to do here is put in the relevant details. So I'm going to use Rather Inventive as an example. So in the website URL, we put ratherinventive.com. That's the page we want people to land on. Maybe I've got a business card with a QR code in it. In the campaign source, I would put business card. In fact, I might just put it with a hyphen in as well. Campaign medium, well, it's going to be print because it's printed, and the campaign name. So this is the bit everyone will see. And so we can call this BC, business card, QR code. And then if I scroll down the bottom, what this little website has done is added the additional information on after the URL, these UTM codes. Google will pick up that additional detail and feed that information into the reports, into the same report we use there. So this is particularly useful if you are generating a QR code, or you want to customize all of your campaign data across all of your different mediums, whether it's ad, email, and so on. If you create your campaign data in here and put that in as the link that you want people to link to, it'll still reach, people will still bounce to the same page. It'll just have this additional bit of copy on the end. Okay, so we run people through that. There's a few other bits in here I don't tend to use. They're normally added by, if people are doing adverts where you might have a particular term that someone has come in on that advert, or you might have different advert content where you're using a different header, where you might want to specify that on here. I'm not particularly bothered. It's just the QR code from my business card. And that's it. That will generate that for you. So a few other things to run through before we finish, which I'll show you very quickly. If you want to download or share a report, you can click on the little share icon at the top left. Top right. It's Google share icon, which doesn't make sense to me, but it's just a few dots with connecting lines. But if you click on that, you've got several options. You can either share a link. So that's useful to share a link to someone who's already got access to the report. They must have access to this account, otherwise they're not going to see it. Or you can download the file and you can choose whether you want the data or do you want it as a PDF. Normally I like a PDF. I like something that's going to show the graphs as well. And that could be useful if you want to send that on to your client or your managers or whoever's reporting on this for you. Or maybe you're the store owner and you want to have a look yourself. So that's one thing you can do there. What it doesn't have is scheduled reports. Universal Analytics allows you to schedule reports so you can get them sent to you on a regular basis. This doesn't yet. They might be putting that in. They haven't said anything about it as far as I'm aware. If you want to schedule reports, then you need to use Data Studio and start importing all of this data into Data Studio and making up your custom report. I will mention this now. This is the club webinar that we did on Data Studio. It's number 54. It's quite in-depth, it's quite fun, and gives you lots of other useful information that is outside of Google Analytics. Something else, just the final thing I'm going to show you is how to add additional reports or additional little, I don't know what they call them, but little snapshot bits of information onto your report snapshot. So what you can do on here, if you want to add something that's more specific for the information you want, click on the pencil item on the right-hand side. And you can see all the cards here and you can order them. So if you want to move them around, you can just drag them up and down and they'll shuffle into place. But I want to add card. Now we've got these summary cards and other cards. I'm not actually sure what the difference is between them, but I want to click on other cards because that's where I want, the one I want is, and it's conversions. Conversions by channel grouping. Yes, that's the one I want. So what that's done is added it right down the bottom. So if I scroll down the bottom, you can see it here. Conversions by channel grouping. And what I can do, because it's important to me, is I can scroll right to the top and just put it just under insights. So we can now see we've got users in the last 30 minutes, insights, and then channel grouping. And that's useful to me because I want to see how many people converted in each one of those channels. I want it at a glance. I don't want to have to dive to a different screen. I want it on my report dashboard here. So that's the end of it. That's the end of the walkthrough. There are other areas within GA4 that you might want to explore. An area that we haven't gone into is monetization. We've also got demographics where you can start to see details of the sorts of location where people are. If you have enhanced analytics, then you're able to get the details like gender and interest. But I think to be fully GDPR compliant, you don't want to collect any of that information. For most people, you don't want to know it. Or you can even look at the technology and what screen size, what browser, operating system, and so on people are using. Again, it's kind of useful. It's good to just generally know what people are looking at. You know, are they using a mobile phone mostly, or are they using a tablet? But most of the time, this is something you'll probably look at rarely. So I've just focused on the things that you need to know. So hopefully you found that useful. It was a recap from one we've done previously, but I think it's very important that everyone make sure they at least have a new Google Analytics 4 account set up. But next up, what we're going to be looking at is how to make a reel on Instagram. So I'm going to be walking you through the steps on how to do it, where to start, and sharing ideas on what content you could create and share. Should be fun. We're here every Friday from 10 a.m. If you want to ask a question or be a guest, email support@ratherinventive.com. And remember that all episodes are available on ratherinventive.com/club. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.